What's going on, Badger Nation? Welcome to the PPC Den podcast, the world's first and longest running show all about how to make your Amazon advertising life a little bit easier and a little bit more profitable. Branded spend on Amazon is an interesting topic that has been discussed many, many times on this here show. What hasn't been discussed is really what to do about it and how to think about it in a way that you can actually do something with. We're going to get onto this in this episode where we're going to be talking about buckets of data analysis. We're going to be talking about negative keywords, sculpting broad and auto-typed campaigns to pick up competitor impressions for really cheap. It's going to be great. Let's jump in. Mike, thanks so much for coming back on the show. Great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael.
Tell me about you moved office locations. Mm-hmm. Are you still working from home? What's your home office strategy like? Yes,
definitely from home. It's actually in the same room, but I'm actually able to use multiple parts of it as opposed to be shoving in. This just be where my desk is. I was just in a corner, and now I have 3 or 4 different zones where I can just sit, stand, be in the chair, different cameras, mics, everything. So it feels like my office is 10 times the size it used to be. Fresh coat of paint, just the color I wanted. It's been great.
Exceptional. Mm-hmm. I recently did something that might inspire some people out there. 4-bedroom house. The master bedroom, or the primary bedroom, is gigantic. And we had all these little tiny rooms that I was using as an office. Swapped it. My office is now the master bedroom. So I've got oodles of space now, and it's been awesome. That was my change over the last year or so. And that's been cool.
That's like some envy there. We live in a 127-year-old home, so these rooms are not large. They're all the same size. They were to shove a bathroom in my daughter's closet, so she now has an ensuite bathroom. So that was...
Right on. Right on. Anyway, as we shift from home office optimization into the world of Amazon PPC, I love that you brought this topic up in our pre-show, which is the cyclical nature, the thing that always comes up, the thing that I feel like people are either paying hyper attention to it or completely forgot about it. And really where you want to be is the sort of balanced middle where you have it under control and tracked, which is, of course, branded spend in Amazon PPC. So why was this up for you? Like, did you recently have an experience where a client or something you noticed where branded spend was a little out of whack? Like, talk us through how this came up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some percentage of every brand that comes to us that will work to try to, reallocate that brand spend. But we've had clusters in the last 3 to 6 months where it seems like somebody's all absorbing the same ideology and they're just pushing 30, 40, even one had 7% of their spend on brand keyword protection. And, now with the search query performance where you can really more objectively understand your search coverage and where you are in the funnel, it's so much easier to objectively show and test inside of Amazon that, hey, when you pull back spend on branded, you either do or don't lose your purchase share. So putting those two together has been remarkable. It's always interesting. I feel like it is definitely a hot take, a controversial topic, and brands come over. And then on the flip side, we'll have brands, to your point, where they're aware that they're spending too much on branded and they're scared to kind of pull back on that because they didn't know they could measure it in search query performance, or they don't know how to measure if they pull back, if they lose the market or the purchase share. And then the others are, they're so used to that awesome looking ROAS that when you go to where you're trying to, take from other competitors or more generic search terms, et cetera, and they're like, what? This ROAS is a third or a tenth of what we're used to. And it's a bit of a shock for them if they're not used to it. So that's what we've kind of seen is we got the bridge side a lot of times as well.
It's so fascinating. I feel like branded spend, both on branded search terms and branded ASIN defense, it's a really interesting intersection. I'm almost picturing in my head, it's like a lighthouse. And against this lighthouse are a bunch of different angles, different kinds of waves crashing from lots of different directions. Because you have brands that are relatively, I'll say, brand unknown. You have who would kill for branded traffic. Because that's a sign of a really healthy brand. Like, hey, if you have 70% branded spend, sure, the bummer on that is maybe I could have gotten those sales without that spend. But at the same time, you have people clamoring for you and who you are. A new brand or a relatively unknown brand would kill for that kind of like apex of my market knows me, and that's awesome. So you have like that perspective, like the life cycle of the brand. And then you also have a lot of brands, sometimes if they wake up and they're like, oh, branded spend, maybe they're listening to this and all of a sudden they begin to ask this question. What's really interesting, I notice a lot, is if a brand's been operating and really analyzing things from a high level, meaning they know that their current ACoS is 35%. And then you begin to do this branded study. All of a sudden now, it turns everything that that brand knew about their ad spend, it shatters their world because it's possibly been years of 30, 35% ACoS. And then all of a sudden you tell them, well, your branded spend converts at 2%, 3% ACoS, and everything else is at like a 60% ACoS. So if you were to turn off all your branded spend today, your account level ACoS would skyrocket and your amount of revenue would be much lower than you thought you were generating. So there's lots of different angles that occur on this. And it's really a question of like, well, how does one manage this and what does one do? And let's take some of those scenarios. I would say the extreme scenario. Somebody comes to you, they've got 70% brand spend. Incredible ACoS because the majority of it is branded. How do you untangle that? Like what is your process that you would do to untangle that?
Absolutely. At first, we're going to dive one layer deep. We're going to try to understand what is the share of that 70% that is branded keywords or search result pages. And the other part is, to your point, like your PAD or PDP, your detail page, product defense, and the little advertising carousels. We want to understand that breakdown. And then from there, we're going to, now you've got to get into the nitty gritty of the actual target versus the search terms, because you can target an ASIN and it show up for a keyword, or you can target a keyword and it shows up for an ASIN. So you have to be really intentional there. And a lot of that is, now we're getting into placements, how we have to force a keyword to show up on just a search and not the ASINs, and vice versa. We got to have a product placement that's high enough so it doesn't show up in search. And so you're just kind of declutter all of that because we have a program and we offer it to a brand like, this is how we would do it. Here's your DIY option, and they'll go and do it. And then the first thing they'll say is, hey, we did all this, but we're still spending and our search terms are still showing up for brand. Where you have to go in and declutter that and like negate and block and make sure your placements are set up. That's the next thing from there. But it's all over the place. That's how we kind of approach it, is to kind of see where it's at and go from there. And while I'm there, I do want to dig into the ASIN or product defense versus keywords as we go through this.
Yeah, so I think that first point, if I can just put a pin on that, or sort of bookend that, this kind of analysis is always helpful. I call it like bucket analysis, meaning like what bucket of spend do I have and how does it behave? So branded search terms is a type of bucket of analysis. Branded ASIN search terms is another bucket of analysis. Placement information, you can cross these dimensions. So branded search terms and top of search placement, so on and so forth. So you begin to tease out each bucket of information that allows you to really understand. And it's difficult because it takes some time for anyone to do this kind of activity. And going back to that company that's been humming along at a 35% and maybe operating only at that top level, almost like they were just analyzing the finances of ad spend, total ad spend versus total ad revenue versus total ACoS or ad cost to total sales. Going deeper and sort of splitting these things out into smaller buckets is such a great point to do, because it can reveal exactly what's going on. And then you mentioned something towards the end of what you were just saying, which was different considerations for ASIN branded defense versus search term based defense. How do you think about those two separate buckets?
Yeah, absolutely. So our DI, our reporting dashboard, is fully built into this. So it's already pre-wired to say, this is what you're spending for branded ASINs, branded keywords, competitor keywords, generic keywords, competitor ASINs. All this is built in, and we can see it when you connect the past 90 days because of the search term level that we can hit. Obviously, if we renew for longer, we can see year over year and all that as well. And then we tie that into an incrementality score, so we understand. So we place incrementality, like a brand keyword is the lowest incrementality. Someone's already searching for it. You're likely going to have an organic placement, strong organic placement. We may not need to convert or spend on that. And then your highest incrementality is you steal from someone else's competitor or someone else's branded search. And then everything else is kind of in between from that. So we track that over time. We have an incrementality score. We put weight on that. And then we work with very large catalogs, lots of parents, ASINs, and lots of child variations within that parent. So we can have 1,000 ASINs that will have 1,000 parents that will end up having 7,000 or 8,000 different variations within those, and so we can pepper and just fully cover all of the carousels on your own product detail pages, which is fun for us. And we approach that, obviously report on it, see what the ROAS, see how the performance, click through, et cetera. But it's a defense, and it's also an upsell and a cross sell potential as well for us. We have a lot of case studies and results about where we can show, hey, this product we've never seen before. Why is it now showing up in the carousel? And it's your own brand product, so you get a lot. It's a much better ROAS than going on a different detail page, et cetera. So it's a little nuance, but we have a lot of ways to know where, based on your CPC here, based on your historic data here, we have an idea what your conversion rate is going to be, and this is a percent of budget that will go in there. And then we can either push really aggressively or pull back. And it's a lot of fun. And we can see it month over month and see how it impacts your incrementality for sure.
Fantastic. So yeah, that sort of, to take that bucket analysis one step further, as one is now analyzing their individual buckets of performance, not every order you get, not every dollar of spend is equal to another dollar of spend. And yeah, I love that I agree with you, the highest, you called it incrementality score. Yeah, you just called it like the highest value order that you could get is like where you're going after a competitor's brand or a competitor's product page, because you basically plucked a sale potentially from them onto you. So that's sort of worth more than just the revenue you generate in some way. That sort of analysis can be very tricky for any brand to begin to dial in. What's the conversation like when you have a conversation with the brand and you're trying to explain these different levels of like, hey, this is a branded keyword, like this has the lowest level, lowest value for us because potentially they would have converted anyway. Going up to competitor term has a different level of value because they might not have converted at all. They might have purchased from a competitor. How does goal setting work at that level for you guys? Like, do you set a account level goal? A lot of people will set an account level total ACoS goal, an account level ACoS goal, individual product category goal, and then you begin to add other dimensions to it, like branded or non-branded product page. It can get very complex to sort of juggle all of that. How did those conversations go with you and your clients?
One of the best scenario is they've done a little bit of all of this. They've done branded keyword, they've done branded PDP or product defense. They've got some competitor conquesting of product detail pages. Maybe they got some branded competitor keywords. So we have a little bit of data where we can say, hey, here's your relative ROAS, conversion rate, et cetera. So these are kind of a starting point, and let's see if we can scale from that. And it's really about getting a barometer of, to your point, preparing them. Hey, competitor keyword is going to be expensive. Let's do a little bit of this. That's like the last thing we want to get into. Let's maximize all the other placements and incremental targetings first, and then go there and kind of work in between. How much can you take? Is it a certain product that is better? Is it a certain brand? Brands want to come to us. I've got Vanity. I have Vanity. They're going to I want to conquest from this brand. Okay, we'll do it, and we'll show you, and let's see if it happens. But yes, that's great. But there's on Amazon, there's millions of sellers. There's millions of brands. Why not just pepper a lot of those little brands you can just absolutely dominate and crush based on review rating and pricings, all the other things. And so I don't forget, we can talk about this later, I guess. Last time I was on, we were talking about targeting through autos and broads and more generic targeting as opposed to exact or an ace and pat. Well, we have consistently done this, and we can get on a competitor's landing page or competitor's detail page for like a third of the cost through an automatic or a category target than if we actually just do the exact pat. And so we can instantly reduce and keep that scale. And so we have brands right now, and to your point about this conversation with the brand is, let's throw some spaghetti on the wall. Let's see what happens. Let's find where the highest ROAS, best conversion, best volume is. And we just went through a tent pole for one of our brands for both Mother's Day, Father's Day, St. Patrick's Day. And the search was really expensive this year. Less traffic. But we picked up and moved a lot of that spend, about 30% of that search spend. We put it on competitor pages, and it filled the entire gap that we lost on the search. All the search traffic was 30 or 40% down. We made up with that on the detail pages of competitors. That was an amazing win for us. We did not think we could make that much up. That was awesome.
yeah, to tease out what you just mentioned there, which was, utilizing a lot of, I guess, broader or looser targeting, and then using that to show up as opposed to the exact ASIN target. My rationale for this has always been, and the way that I've sort of thought about this is, this goes into the bucket of like, that's probably just the way the Amazon algorithm was designed, or the Amazon PPC algorithm was designed, where exact matches, whether it be exact ASIN targeting or exact match keywords, sort of enter a different style of auction than a broad match keyword or an auto does. Case in point, one of these low bid autos, right, generally are able to generate clicks cheaper for the same search term than if you bid on that search term exactly. So I think Amazon has some sort of mechanism to play with different auction levels based off of different targeting. And there's lots to be said about how to work within that. But just because it was such a cool little thing that you just shared, tell me more about targeting competitor product pages with a sort of broad or loose style targeting. Is there anything more to say about that?
Yeah, so, placements. I think the last time I was on here, we were really heavy. So we have replicated campaigns. You can have an ASIN target, a keyword target, a category target. We have dedicated campaigns that are PVP specific, so high placement, product placements, and very low bids. And then we have the inverse of that, where we have, higher top of search or medium rest of search, and then no multiplier for product placement. So again, we know this campaign is going to show up here for this search term or this ASIN, et cetera. So that's one way that we can be very granular, very specific, where we have, like data hygiene on the back end. Once you cleaning that together, Amazon makes it messy, and it's like, I can't separate this. Then from there, what we found is a category target will hit a product detail page for about a third the cost than if you actually just did an exact pat or an ASIN target. And then somewhere in between is when you do an ASIN expanded target. But again, we want to make sure we only go for that ASIN's product detail page versus the search, and go back and forth on that. And then the way we hygiene, because you still have bleed over and crossover, even as restrictive and siloed as these campaigns can be, our reporting builds in and say, okay, this was a competitor ASIN target, but it converted for a competitor keyword. Or this was a branded target and it converted for a competitor target. So we do clean that in the back end so we can still see that, because you're going to have bleed over regardless.
I've done a lot of research in this arena of where the type of targeting is really assisted through the use of negatives. So I've done a lot of that over the years, which is target something really loose, like a category or something like that, and then use a lot of negative keyword sculpting to sort of sculpt it in the direction of a competitor. That's something that I found works quite well. Have you guys found the same thing? Like, how often are you using negatives to sort of try to accomplish that component?
Our catalogs, campaign sets in the hundreds and thousands because of the number of products that we had and replication and duplication. We have accounts that have hundreds of thousands and millions of negatives across the entire campaign set for this reason. I'm going to tease it up for you. A relevant search term, what would be your comfort level, or how do you have a comfort level of how many clicks or how much spend you would before you negate what you would perceive as a relevant search term?
Well, relevance, I would say you only need one click. It's either relevant or not. But what I would say is like when I would underperforming to the point where I would want to negate it, I would say probably 2 to 3 times the average cost per conversion of the account.
Yeah, so we have some campaigns that are set up with that logic, very similar, give us some room to breathe. But when you go into the autos, the categories, it's a highly relevant campaign or a highly relevant search term, we will negate it 2 clicks. Even if it takes 30 plus clicks on average to convert, or 15 to 20 clicks. And wouldn't go into details. There's a campaign, a negation reset and a sweep where we just pull everything out, do it for a few days, make sure something sticks. But when you do this really aggressive category or automatic or even broad targeting, you're going to get a lot of low relevant search terms. They're really cheap clicks. You have to be really vigilant, because you're going to catch them in other campaigns as well, so not be overly concerned with that. But that was something for our philosophy that really took us a lot of being like, hey, 2 clicks and we're negating for this? We can't do 1 click, because it was like, is this not enough? I thought it was interesting you mentioned that.
No, that's awesome. And that I would say, and you have this sort of like you mentioned too that they'd be duplicated elsewhere. So it's not as if you're losing complete visibility there, but when you're building these, you're balancing the broadness of an auto with the specificity of what you're trying to accomplish with it. That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned something that I absolutely love, which is the negative keyword reset, where you just go in periodically and you will just reset negatives of, it happens a lot with seasonality. It happens a lot when you want to, because conversion rates change over time. Ideally, they get better. So for something that you didn't convert in the past, you can always go back and clear it out. So I love that you mentioned that. We've already got so many awesome things here. Studying your branded spend, using search query performance to sort of measure that, watching yourself reduce your branded spend, and measuring that against your search query performance to be sure that's aligned. Dividing it up, studying the product-based branded defense versus the search term-based, building dashboards to better study this, understanding these different buckets of spend have different levels of sort of value or incrementality, which is just a beautiful word, incrementality that you give versus your own branded searches versus a competitor's search. Loved what you talked about building these broad or auto style targeting and then balancing it with lots of negatives, doing negative keyword resets. That's all part of my philosophy too. And of course, the other thing that you mentioned too was looser targeting with the negatives. Yeah, so many amazing topics here. Anything else to say about branded traffic, branded visibility? Because a lot of this stuff is, we've sort of wrangled it in quite a bit. But I guess the question I have is like, number one, how, and it's about negatives, how fervently are you trimming branded spend? And what I mean by that is, I've worked with some people before that have come to me and that have said, hey, I don't want to appear for any branded search ever. So every single one of my campaigns needs a negative phrase, my brand. What are your thoughts on that?
That is a challenging negation for us, in that you can over negate and block a relevancy. So if you block an ASIN or you block a keyword that Amazon thinks is relevant, or these other search terms are relevant, and you block that, you'll have like a spidering effect to that. We don't really know. I don't have a good terminology for it, but if you over negate and you basically, when you negate, you're trying to train it its relevancy. Like, hey, this is not relevant. Amazon's going to make assumptions. Now there's AI and there's all kinds of stuff involved. But it's like, hey, they've negated this search term and this search term and this search term, and there's this massive overlap over here. So they're going to start like phrase negating for you. And then if you negative phrase your own brand, which I'm not saying no, we do that obviously, but be careful with it. Don't overdo it. Don't do it in a campaign where you don't really need to, where you're not getting brand traffic. I would say wait until you see brand traffic on a certain campaign and then start doing it. Try it negative exact first. Because on negative phrase, that's a massive negation outside of just the actual phrase match. It's going to start looking at relevancy and what else is relevant to your brand, and it's going to start blocking on some of that stuff as well. We've seen that over and over again.
And let me ask you a perhaps more specific question. Let's say a client does come to you and they do have 70% of all of their search terms, all of their product page sales, 70% of all their traffic was branded. What do you consider that? Like, would you say, hey, let's get this under 50%? Like, what is the approach that you would take?
It's going to be a taper. It's going to be a shock for the brand, especially when it's that high. And we have to wait, 1 to 3 weeks and sometimes a month before the search query performance data like catches up and shows, and there's some latency in that as well. So it's really a 30-day reduction. And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to cut it in half every single month. So if you're at 70, your goal would be around 35, 40 for the first month, and see what happens. Measure it against the search query performance. Okay, no loss in your funnel share on your brand search term. Okay, now let's try to cut that 35, 40 back down to 15, 20, 25. What happens there? And you just keep doing halves until you get down. So we have brands that, yes, they come to us, 50, 60% of their spend. Within 3 to 6 months, we're down to 5% of their spend is on brand, and the branded sales are either the same or not. They convert cheaper because you're not getting. In our case, we have a lot of campaigns, a lot of products that you can end up inflating your own bids inside your campaign manager before it goes out to the auction as well. So we want to have really granular campaign. Like this is a branded campaign and nobody else is bidding on that. So we don't inflate our bids as well. But it's really just kind of reducing it. And you're going back to that search query performance. We call it a query IQ. It's our intelligence that we built in-house. And it just shows the following impact over time. Are you still getting impression share? Are you still getting the click-through, add to carts, et cetera? What's going on? And so far, we have not seen any issues.
And I guess to follow up on that question, what is the you mentioned bringing it down over time, checking it against search query performance to be sure that your conversion share for these branded terms is the same. How are you actually doing that? Like how are you engineering? What are the actions that you're pressing on the keyboard and mouse in order to bring it down?
And I think I don't know if you asked or like I was inferring it, a good percentage, a single digit of your ad spend, less than 10% of your ad spend should be going to branded keywords. ASINs and product detail page defense is a totally different strategy depending on the size of your catalog, et cetera. First, it's looking at the campaigns that you have. How much commingling do you have? And we're going to start just blocking keywords specifically in a campaign that we don't want the branded in. It's commingle. Let's clean up that. We try not to relaunch campaigns, especially if they have significant historical. We want to keep that as much as possible. So we're going to clean that up. All right. And block the keyword or block the ASINs or whatever it may be in the campaign. That spend is likely going to shift somewhere else if you haven't fully done the negation and application, negative phrase or exact ASINs or whatever on the other campaign. So you're constantly having to fight that. Where does it pop up? Again, a lot of our products are going to be competing for very similar search terms, whether branded or not. So it'll go from one campaign, it'll go to another one, and it'll go to another one. So when we start seeing that, instead of playing whack-a-mole, we'll do a large full campaign negation or full campaign pausing. All this is very easy for us to revert, either at a campaign level or a wide level within the actions that we can create. It's like, hey, and we try to do as much at once so you can see what the impact is quickly. If you piecemeal it and you do slow, it's really hard to see the performance and to see the impact from it. So we do it really abruptly. What does the next couple of days look like? And then go from there.
Awesome. So we ran the gauntlet of branded spend. I think we touched on a lot of topics that haven't been brought up in years past. So I appreciate you bringing some more of this modern, fresh stuff and bringing this stuff to light. So thank you so much for that. That's all my thoughts. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about branded spend and how to think about it, how to mitigate it, how to control it, which is really the ultimate goal I think we're getting at. You want to be able to control your branded spend.
I think it's one, again, be intentional, be aggressive, see what happens. Don't be afraid. If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got kind of thing. So let's see what happens. Let's see if it shakes. Have a plan in place. Figure out how to use your search query performance. Figure out how to measure what you're doing. And the second part of that is we've built a cannibalization score in-house as well. It kind of does the exact opposite of the incrementality that we're doing. So, hey, what happens when we pull our branded spend down and thus branded ad sales? Obviously, let's see how that impacts our total sales. Let's see how that impacts our organic sales and ad sales. That's how it lets us know is our cannibalization decreasing or increasing as we push and pull in these branded search terms as well. So it's another way, another layer of testing as well and confirming and showing a brand. Because I tell you the worst scenario, and this is like a nightmare for us, brand comes in. They're at 50% branded spend. We cut it down to 25% in the first month. Sales drop. They're going to automatically assume the reason that sales dropped is because they cut the spend in half on their brand. So two options. Turn it right back on, see if sales recover. It doesn't happen, I can just tell you. But sometimes we have to do that. And the other is the cannibalization score helps us to show that. It's like, hey, everything is down. It's not tied to this. And then we can show in the search query performance, we can show the branded traffic is the same or is down. So that will also show like, hey, it's not because your brand traffic's branded ad sales are down. Your branded traffic is down, which has nothing to do with the ads in that regard. So there's lots of ways. We want to make sure we check and balance it because we do this every day. Brands have never done this, to your point, for years. They've been thinking about this. So we try to cover all the bases and give them that security because there are brands that it's really challenging to get them to take that leap.
I just wanted to celebrate that, we live in the digital marketing world where a lot of people talk about digital marketing and they might say things like this always works all the time, no matter what, like it only goes up and to the right. So I always appreciate moments where, potentially data will do something. And it takes some time and takes some experience and some wisdom to be able to interpret that data and analyze that data and study that data, like what this actually means. So I like that you have sort of different lenses in which you're analyzing data because doing digital marketing, doing PPC is all about just understanding what's going on and then asking yourself, like, what is the next best option based off this? Like, why did it change and what do we do about it? And if you can figure out those two questions, I think you're ahead of 90% of PPCers.
You have to be able to measure it, both in like where you're actually deploying it and its impact as well. If you can't measure the impact, then I would say spend more time trying to figure out how to measure the impact, or ask someone else to figure out how to do the impact, because it's important. Otherwise, you're doing it blind. You have no idea. Like I said, sales down, I cut branded spend, that's the culprit. No, it's not. But we want to be able to show that.
Well said. Well, Mike, where can people find you if they have any more questions for you?
Sure. Mike at adverio.io. So MIKE at ADVERIO.io. I'll answer to every email.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming back on the PPC Den and sharing some of your experience with us. I very much appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone out there in Badger Nation did as well. Thanks so much. I hope to have you back on the show in a couple months. Everyone else, I'll see you next week here on the PPC Den podcast.
I've launched campaigns and picked keywords. I've got my bids, set placements too. And bad mistakes.